Hello. In this lesson, we're going to be learning about conflict. Okay. So far we've been talking about narratives. And narratives, of course, as we know, are stories. And every good narrative has a plot. And we've learned about plot in a previous lesson. And we know that plot has different elements. And the main thing that drives plot forward, or that moves us from one element of plot to the next, is conflict. Okay. Now, we have two categories of conflict, internal and external. But we actually have four types of conflict. I'll explain that in a moment. But I want to point out here that although we're only learning about four types of conflict today, there are actually more. But you only have to concern yourself or worry about these four types that we're going to be learning about today. Okay. So the first type of conflict is man versus self. This is an internal conflict, and it takes place entirely within a character's mind. Okay. So as it says here, man versus self involves a character's personal thoughts, values, emotions, etc. Essentially, this is when a character needs to make a decision. And they're faced with two or more choices, and they have to make a difficult decision. I'll give you an example. Maybe you're reading a book about a poor family, okay? And the mother of that family, she's walking along the street and she finds a wallet full of money, okay? Now she can choose to take that money and feed her family, or to give that wallet to the authorities, hand it back to the person who owns the money. Okay, so she would be conflicted here. She would be faced with two choices, and she would have to choose between both choices. Okay, so that would be an internal conflict. Now, the first type of external conflict is man versus man. This is perhaps the most common type of conflict that you will see in a movie or read in a book. Okay. This is when the main character is in conflict with another character, either human or non-human. Okay, so this is Batman versus the Joker, or again, I always use Star Wars as my example here, so it could be Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. Okay. Now I want to point out that for man versus man, the characters do not necessarily need to be human. Think about a Disney movie, The Lion King, for instance. You've got Simba versus Scar. They're not human, they're lions. But they show human characteristics. They act like humans. They think like humans. Okay, so in Disney movies, when you have characters that are animals, but they speak and think and act like humans, and if they're in conflict, then it would be a man versus man type of conflict. If, on the other hand, you've got a protagonist who's a human, and he or she is in conflict with, let's say, a bear. That protagonist is lost in the forest, and they have to survive from being chased by a bear. If it's just a regular bear who doesn't speak and act like a human and think like a human, then that would not be man versus man. That would be man versus nature. Okay. Or next type of conflict. So man versus nature is when the main character is in conflict with the forces of nature, which serve as an antagonist. You think about disaster movies. Okay, maybe the characters need to flee or run from an erupting volcano or a giant tidal wave or something like that. The last type of conflict that we're going to talk about today is man versus society. This is when the main character is in conflict with a larger man-made source or group. Example, school rules, culture shock, peer pressure, etc. So, I'll give you an example here. Perhaps you have a story about a person from America, and that American is moving to, let's say, Russia. Now, in America, that person would have gotten used to a certain set of social norms, okay, different ways to act in society that are considered normal. would have gotten used to eating certain foods, okay, and just acting or interacting with others within society in a certain way. But now this person moves to Russia, and they do things very differently in Russia. Okay, they eat different foods, they interact differently. Okay, everything just seems to be different. So, if the story is about that American getting used to life in Russia and getting used to the social norms in Russia, okay, that would be a type of conflict, and that would be man versus society. Okay, or maybe you've got a protagonist who moves to a new school. Okay, you've got a 7th, 8th, 9th grader, I don't know, transfers schools, and they want to hang out with the cool kids, and of course everybody wants to be cool, but maybe this protagonist is not accepted initially or at first. Maybe they're made fun of, maybe they face bullying, but they really want to fit in with the cool kids at school. Okay, if the movie is about their struggle to fit in, okay, and deal with bullying and try to become a cool kid, then that would be a man versus society type of conflict. Okay, so those are the 2 categories and 4 types of conflict we're going to be discussing this year. And thank you for listening.